Moschino used to mock fashion. Now it's not even part of the conversation. Once known for fake Chanel suits, McDonald's gowns, and Barbie-themed runways, it was the brand that made fashion fun and wasn't afraid to make fun of fashion. But after a decade of viral moments, ironic slogans, and pop culture overload, the magic ran out. Jeremy Scott is gone. The brand's identity is up in the air. Sales are falling, and the Moschino name, once rebellious, then ridiculous, is now just uncertain. This is a brand that built its empire on satire. It never wanted to be timeless. It wanted to be loud, clever, subversive. But when a brand becomes a parody of itself, what's left to reinvent? Before Moschino became fashion's loudest label, it was something even rarer, a joke that people took seriously. In 1983, Franco Moschino launched his label in Milan with a mission that didn't quite fit the fashion world at the time. He wasn't interested in fantasy or glamour. He was interested in calling fashion out and then selling it back to you with a wink. His first collection included a fake Chanel suit, jacket stitched with the words, "waste of money," and riffs on everything from Louis Vuitton to Marlboro. It was part protest, part performance, and totally unforgettable. Franco had studied painting before entering fashion, and it showed. His clothes were visual jokes, part collage, part critique. He once left flowers and tomatoes on every seat at a show so editors could vote with their reactions. It wasn't just design, it was performance. Surreal, contradictory, and impossible to ignore. And beneath all the irony, he had a point. Franco wasn't mocking fashion because he hated it. He was mocking it because he cared about what it could be. He used his platform to speak out against fur, sexism, the beauty myth, environmental waste. In 1989, he paused an entire runway show to play a video about pollution. In 1993, he turned an AIDS awareness fundraiser into a full Moschino spectacle, complete with red ribbon children marching down the runway. It was chaotic, confrontational, and it made headlines. But for all the protest energy, the business was rock solid. Franco had partnered early on with a powerful manufacturing group, which gave Moschino the infrastructure it needed to grow. Licensing took off. The Moschino name started showing up on jeans, sunglasses, perfume, even hotel rooms. There were hearts, peace signs, harlequin prints, and real profit margins. And then just as the brand was hitting its stride, Franco was gone. In 1994, he passed away at the age of 44 from complications related to AIDS. It was sudden and surreal. The man who had made fun of everything, death included, wasn't there to write the next chapter. The brand would go on without him. But the question was already hanging in the air. If Moschino was built on one man's voice, what happens when that voice disappears? After Franco's death, no one knew exactly what Moschino was supposed to be, but someone had to keep it running. That someone was Rosella Jardini, Franco's longtime collaborator, and the only person who really understood how the brand worked from the inside. She wasn't hired for shock value. She wasn't trying to reinvent anything. Her job was to protect the legacy, and for a while, that was enough. Under Jardini, Moschino stayed weird, just in a quieter way. The fake Chanel suits were still there. So were the hearts, peace signs, polka dots, and the campy slogans. But the activism faded. The rebellion softened. The shows became more playful than provocative. And the brand slowly shifted from being fashion's rebel to something closer to fashion's eccentric aunt. Still fun, still recognizable, but no longer challenging the system. Financially, it worked. The diffusion lines, cheap and chic, love Moschino, started doing serious volume. Accessories sold well. By the late 90s, thanks to Jardini's steady hand and commercial instincts, Moschino's business was booming. In 1999, AFA, its longtime production partner, formally took control, giving the brand even greater reach. New stores opened across Europe and Asia. Licensing deals followed. Moschino was no longer just a label. It was an empire. But with that growth came something else. Dilution. The main line, Moschino Couture, started to blend in with the lower-tier lines. There were too many collections, too many variations of the same thing, all loud, all branded, but none with the edge Moschino once had. The brand's identity started to blur, and in an era dominated by minimalism, it became harder and harder to sell maximalist irony as luxury. Still, Jardini kept it afloat. For nearly 2 decades, she preserved Franco's DNA while navigating a market that didn't always know what to do with it. Her final show, Spring/Summer 2014, was a tribute to the brand's 30th anniversary. It was fun, nostalgic, and full of the energy that had once made Moschino famous. But even she seemed to know the brand couldn't stay in this in-between space forever. Moschino needed a new direction, and it was about to get one, whether it was ready or not. When Jeremy Scott took over Moschino in 2013, it didn't feel like continuity. It felt like chaos, in the best possible way. Scott wasn't interested in preserving the brand's legacy. He was interested in blowing it up. His debut runway was themed around McDonald's uniforms. Models walked out in red and yellow skirt suits, clutching Happy Meal handbags. Critics rolled their eyes. But the internet loved it. Suddenly, Moschino was everywhere. For the next few years, it felt like the brand was running on pure adrenaline. Barbie collections, Looney Tunes collaborations, dresses printed with dry cleaning tags. Everything was big, referential, and completely unserious. You didn't need a fashion degree to get it. That was kind of the point. Moschino had become a pop culture machine, and Scott knew how to keep the machine running. The real business wasn't in the runway looks. It was in the accessories. Phone cases, novelty bags, perfume bottles shaped like teddy bears. The pieces that looked like toys, but came with designer price tags. For a while, it worked. The brand felt fast, clever, instantly recognizable. But as the seasons went on, the playbook started to show. Every collection needed a theme. Every theme needed a punchline, and eventually, the punchlines weren't landing the same way. What once felt wild and new started to feel like repetition. There were still headlines, but fewer people were paying attention. By the early 2020s, the market was shifting. Taste was changing. Quiet branding, elevated basics, storytelling through restraint. None of that played well with a brand built on cartoon-sized irony. And Scott, who had once seemed like the perfect disruptor, suddenly looked a little out of place. His final show in 2023 was centered on inflation and consumer anxiety. A commentary on excess, full of exaggerated silhouettes and staged opulence. It should have been timely, but it didn't really register. Not the way his early collections had. When he left Moschino later that year, there was no big exit moment. Just a quiet announcement, and a brand suddenly without direction or momentum. After a decade of maximalism, Moschino found itself in unfamiliar territory. No creative lead, no viral campaign, and no plan. The era of slogans and spectacle had run its course, and whatever came next hadn't quite taken shape. The brand needed a new direction, but more than that, it needed someone who could actually deliver one. That someone, at least for a moment, was David Renna. He came from Gucci, where he'd worked quietly under Alessandro Michele, and his appointment felt like a deliberate shift. Someone with roots in big house luxury, but none of the baggage. A designer who understood construction, timing, restraint. It wasn't flashy, but it made sense. Then, just 10 days after he was named creative director, he passed away. There was no collection, no teaser, no plan to build on. It was a personal tragedy, but also a professional blow, not just because of who René was, but because of what he represented. Moschino had made its decision, and now it was back at zero. In early 2024, AFA announced Adrian Apialaza as his successor. He didn't come with headlines, but his resume was serious. McQueen, Vuitton, Chloé. A pattern of being close to visionaries without chasing their spotlight. And maybe that's what the brand needed. Not a celebrity, just someone who knew how to get to work. The first show came fast. Apialaza had only a few weeks to prepare, which meant there wasn't time to reinvent anything. Instead, he focused on what was already there. He pulled from Franco's archive, literally. There was a reworked mannequin dress from 1992, tailoring with seams intentionally left exposed, coats that looked like they were still in progress. The slogans were back, too, though more faded than defiant. It felt less like a statement, more like someone sketching their way into the brand. Some people wanted more, but most understood what it was. A first step. Not bold, not ironic, not selling a theme, just trying to find a rhythm again. What Apialaza didn't have was time to settle in. AFA was under pressure. The company posted a €20 million loss in 2023, with revenues still dropping in early 2025. To cover ground, they sold off Moschino's beauty license, one of its most bankable assets. They called it restructuring. But from the outside, it looked more like damage control. Creatively, the reset had begun. But behind the scenes, the stakes were still getting higher. Moschino was never built to be timeless. That was part of the appeal. It thrived on exaggeration, irony, contradiction. A brand that didn't just play with fashion's rules, but made fun of the people who wrote them. But in 2025, that strategy doesn't land the same way. Luxury today is about value, not just price tags or heritage, but clarity. What does a brand stand for? What does it offer that others don't? And for Moschino, those questions have gotten harder to answer. The Jeremy Scott era left behind visibility. Moschino became a household name again, but it also left a kind of creative hangover. For years, the brand was known more for gimmicks than garments, more for jokes than design. That worked when novelty felt exciting. But now, novelty is everywhere. The market is saturated with logos, references, camp, and consumers are asking for something different. At the same time, Moschino isn't a blank slate. It has a real history, one rooted in protest, in play, in taking fashion seriously by not taking it too seriously. Franco's vision was chaotic, but it had a point. It challenged the system. It said something. That's the part that still resonates, not the slogans or the colors or the hearts, but the instinct to disrupt. Apialaza seems to understand that, at least in spirit. His first collection didn't try to rewrite the story. It looked for ways to reconnect. There's potential there, in the archive, in the craft, in the parts of Moschino that were always more subversive than silly. But potential only matters if it turns into something people want. Because at this point, Moschino isn't fighting for buzz. It's fighting for relevance. There are already brands doing camp. There are brands doing irony. There are even brands doing Franco Moschino better than Moschino has lately. What's missing is a clear reason to care again. So what do you think? Can Moschino still be the brand that challenges the industry? Or has it lost what made it different in the first place? Let me know your thoughts below. And as always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.